Hello and welcome to season number 2 of the Midwest Gaming Classic podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gares, panel director of the Midwest Gaming Classic. And this very first episode of season 2 focuses on Gar Nelson of the Garcade located in Menomonee Falls, Wisconsin. I've known Gar now for a few years, and he likes to bring a bunch of his arcade games and pinball games to the Midwest Gaming Classic, and usually has a large room at the convention, which is usually right next to my panel room. So I get a chance to talk to Gar every year and play some of his really cool arcade cabinets and pinball machines. Now, back in 2021, I interviewed him at his arcade, and I was able to take a self-guided tour around his arcade and do some filming there. And the reason I was there interviewing Gar was because at the time, back in 2021, I was getting together a new film called Support Your Local Arcade. And this would be a follow-up film from my first one, which was Beyond the Comic Panels, which had to do with comic book artists and animators and how to get into the industry and some behind the scenes of the industry itself. But it was more of an informative documentary on basically what you need to do to get in by industry professionals. So back to the new film that I wanted to do, Support Your Local Arcade. Basically, that was going to be about the rise of arcades back in the day, and then the fall of arcades, and then arcades not being around for a few years, and then coming back up from the ashes, much like the bird the phoenix, and coming back kind of in a slow incline, but with a vengeance. You have Doc Mack of Galloping Ghosts. You have the two owners of Nerd Haven in Madison, Wisconsin. Also in Madison is Geeks Mania. Well, I did an interview with Gar Nelson. That was the first interview that I did for this documentary. The documentary is not going to come out, but I am going to have his segment right here with this episode of the Midwest Gaming Classic podcast. So, you know what? Enough of me talking. Why don't we get to the video? Support your local arcade. Gar Nelson, Garcade. Take 1 through 15, roll 1 through 15. Cameras 1, camera 2. And the date is 6/19/21, day interior. All right, so just relax and as much as you can.
Right.
All right. All right, I will be asking you a series of questions, of course. And, basically, we're going to start with your memories of arcades as a child and going there and whatnot. And you becoming aware of the arcade business and, remembering them going out of business. And then there was a time period where there were very little to none, and now the resurrection. So that will pertain to the first question. How do you remember your arcade history? From where you went as a child to arcades going out of business to the resurrection of arcades like yours?
I'd have to say probably the earliest memories that I have of going to arcades was going to birthday parties as a little kid. Back then we had a couple of different places where we could go, like Showbiz Pizza, Chuck E. Cheese. And I'd say that was probably my first real experience with playing arcade games, was going to those sorts of places and being able to try a couple of different things. After that, as I got a little bit older, we had a couple of arcades close to my house where I was able to ride my bike, so occasionally we'd go and visit some of the local arcades that had popped up around the south side of Milwaukee. And we really had a good time doing it. It was me and a couple of my buddies, and we'd take off for an afternoon and spend an hour or two in the arcade plunking quarters away one after another.
When you would do that with your friend or whomever with birthday parties, and how often would you go? Do you remember that?
For birthday parties, you'd wind up going a couple of times a year. Your friends at school would have parties and you'd get invited out. You'd go and play games and eat cheap pizza and just have fun hanging out until your parents came to pick you up. As we got older and we started hanging out at some of the other arcades, those would happen less frequently because of the distance that we would have to travel and riding our bikes to and from, and of course then having to come up with quarters to be able to play the games. That was always a difficulty, especially in the early 80s. Things were a little different. Money was a little bit tighter for a lot of folks. So the once in a while that you'd be able to go to an arcade was a really special experience. It was very cool. We probably started going to birthday parties in the arcades around 1981, 1982. And then I kind of got old enough to be able to ride my bike to arcades kind of closer to 1983, 1984, when a lot of the arcades were starting to close up shop and there would become less and less of them available around that time frame.
Okay, what was the favorite arcades you went to? You didn't mention that, of course, Showbiz Pizza, but what was did you have a go-to place that you always liked?
We had a couple places to go, but for the most part, we wound up at Aladdin's Castle. Aladdin's Castle, obviously a chain that was open in the Milwaukee area. And then eventually they closed and then reopened again as another arcade called Go Bananas. After they wound up closing, there really wasn't much else available as far as arcades.
Now, do you remember Sega's time out at Southridge Mall?
I do. That was another arcade that we would periodically go to, especially with that being in a mall. Anytime that you'd go school shopping or your folks would drag you out to the mall to go hang out and pick things up, and malls were a really big experience back in the 1980s. So you wound up spending a lot of time there, and usually when you would go there, your parents would wind up bribing you with a couple of quarters at the local arcade. So we got to go and spend some time out at at Southridge, and it was a really fun experience.
Tell us who you are and your background. When did you open this arcade and why?
My name is Gar Nelson. I'm co-owner of the Garcade in Menomonee Falls, Wisconsin. We opened our commercial arcade in July of 2017. We've been operating for almost 4 years now. I started in the collecting hobby closer to 2003, 2004. That was the first time that I had really gotten around to picking up an arcade game for my home. Took a couple of years before the arcade hobby really kind of solidified with me, and with my kids kind of growing up and getting a little bit older, I was looking for something to do with my family, and I leaned back into the arcade and pinball hobby as a way to be able to go places with my kids, take road trips, and then have something special that we kind of didn't have, or that I didn't have growing up, and that a lot of people don't have nowadays, where we could have an arcade in our basement and have family parties at our house and different celebrations where we could invite a bunch of the kids' friends over to hang out and play games and have a good time. After that, it took a couple of years of collecting, and I eventually got to a point where I had 25 games in my basement, another 20 games out in my garage, and I literally just kind of ran out of square footage at home. At that time, I started throwing around an idea of opening a commercial arcade. So I wound up going through and doing some research, talking to and meeting a lot of local arcade owners around the Midwest, and kind of trying to figure out what it would take for me to be able to open a place of my own. After a couple of years and a little bit of job dissatisfaction, I felt like I needed a change in my life. And so I approached my business partner, Tim Byron, to see if he would be interested in opening an arcade with me. He had gone with me on several arcade runs and picked up things from my basement. He started getting some of my overflow into his basement. He started buying his own games, and next thing you know, we decided to jump into this business venture. And after about 4 years now, we haven't looked back since.
Please tell us your first memory of playing a pinball or video game, and where was it? Did it influence you opening this arcade?
Actually, I have a very early memory of playing both an arcade game and a pinball machine. My family during the early 1980s, late 1970s, would go up to Eagle River, Wisconsin to a resort where we would go and have a cabin to ourselves on a lake and be able to spend a lot of family time together. And I remember one night leaving really early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, so that we could get up there nice and early to be able to spend the entire day up there. And on the way up to the place that we were going, we stopped off somewhere to get breakfast. And when we stopped off to go and get breakfast, they just happened to have one arcade game sitting there at the place. And of all the games, it was Battlezone, which is very cool because you get to kind of step up onto a step and look through a periscope. And it kind of gave a different game experience. And for somebody who was very young, probably 6 years old or so at the time, that was really neat. And then once we got up to the place where we were staying, the resort had a small bar in the middle of all the cabins, and that's where kind of the adults would go and have a couple of drinks, and the kids would go and get sodas. And they had a couple of electromechanical pinball machines, and they were set for $0.10 a play, and our parents would give us $1 and we'd get 10 plays out of it. And we would spend our afternoons playing pinball and then leaving and going and jumping in the lake and going fishing and then going back to go and play more pinball. And it would be that way for, you know, a weekend or a week at a time. And it was something that was very fun growing up. And that experience definitely helped me to find this hobby as something to do that brought me a lot of joy and would have a lot of nostalgia, not just for myself, but for my patrons as well.
How long did you look, and why did you pick this location for your arcade?
When we first started talking about doing the arcade, I was really looking for, I had a checklist of things that I wanted out of my arcade. I wanted something that was going to have a lot of square footage that I would be able to grow into. I wanted it to be in a nice neighborhood where there would be the money to be able to support this kind of an entertainment venture. I wanted to be close enough to Milwaukee where I could dip into a large pool of people to make sure I had a solid clientele base. And we spent probably 3 years developing a business plan and trying to find a location to be able to build the arcade into. We looked on the south side of Milwaukee, the north side, the west side, downtown, and kept looking at spaces and needed to find something that would be at the right price point and have the right amount of square footage. And a lot of places that we looked at, literally for years, just did not meet the criteria that we had in place. And the best part about that is it allowed me to continue moving forward with developing a business plan so that I could understand not just finding the location, but being able to start the business and be able to get it up and running and kind of work out a lot of the other kinks while we were looking for a location for us to be able to open. And after, like I said, 2 or 3 years of looking, it was actually my business partner, Tim, that found this location. And the place had been vacant for 7 years. It had nothing in it. The floors were bare. The walls were still kind of half painted, had some stuff on them. And it really didn't fit our aesthetic, but we saw a lot of potential in this location. And so we decided that we wanted to go ahead and explore it, see what we could do as far as making it our own. And once we got everything set in place with the location decided upon, then we went through and we painted the walls and put in the carpeting and kind of really made the place our own. One thing that's really cool about the place that we're in is, although it has a drop ceiling, we pulled every single drop ceiling panel out of our ceiling and painted them black so that it would give a cool aesthetic. It would help darken the place a little bit so that the game experience would be very true to what we remember growing up. And after removing and painting probably almost 1,200 ceiling tiles, we really knew that we had something special going on here. It gives it a really neat look. We wanted that kind of Tron aesthetic as far as what it looked like with the white lines and the black backgrounds, and we felt that that kind of lent itself, and then we added in some custom lighting, playing around with both black light and white black light UV lights, some color filters over some traditional lighting so that we would have enough white light where customers wouldn't feel like they were in a dark cave per se, and kind of at the same time gave the same feel that you would get by installing neon, but being able to kind of play with it after the fact and do different things with different colors. So we felt that the design and decor that we were putting into our arcade was going to help set us off as something a little bit different, and at the same time keep a little bit of who we were when we first started this venture, which was home collectors. Give it the feel like you're coming into somebody's home arcade versus a large commercial arcade.
When you first started your arcade, how many machines did you have and where did you get them?
When we first opened our arcade, we opened with 55 arcade games and 4 pinball machines. So we were just under 60 machines on the floor. A lot of those games came from my own personal collection. I brought about 40-45 games with me in a couple of project games. My business partner, Tim, by that point had amassed 10-12 games in his house. And then we wound up talking to a couple of local collectors about what they might have around their place and scored a couple of extra machines. But initially it just started with what we had. We got really good business advice from several of the arcade owners that we had talked to, stressing about how important it would be to kind of just get the doors open, just get people interested, just keep going with moving forward, and don't let all the little things stop you. Like, keep going, keep moving forward. And so that's what we did. We got those 60 games up and running. We got them running really, really well. We literally spent 48 hours in lead up to our grand opening here, working all day, all night long, trying to get everything ready for day one, hour one. And by the time we had gotten to that point, we were down to about $35 left in our bank account. So we were about as all in could get. And it was a great feeling, because that first day when we opened, we had a line of people outside of our door, and we were hoping for 50, 60 people that day, and 200 people showed up. So it really gave us a good feeling knowing that we were doing the right thing and bringing value to the area that we're in, and that there was going to be enough reception by our patrons and clientele to be able to continue doing what we do. And over the first 2 years that we were here, we added about 120 games to the floor. So we were averaging about every 4 to 5 days adding a new game to the floor and adding to the value that we were giving our customers.
What have you learned about owning an arcade that you didn't know before?
I think owning an arcade really isn't all that different from a lot of other businesses. You go in understanding just enough to get into trouble, and then you spend the rest of your time trying to figure out how to get back out of trouble. A lot of what we learned when we opened was just pressure under fire, making sure that things kept going, learning a lot of the customer service side of it, and really pushing for what kinds of value can we offer to our customers besides just the arcade games. And so that wound up eventually turning into being able to do birthday parties and having dedicated party space and things like that. We didn't know really what our business was going to look like long term. We knew we wanted to open an arcade. We knew that we wanted to do something different and do something fun. And we originally didn't know how much work it was going to wind up becoming, but when it's a labor of love, it really is worth doing. And it's something that we absolutely enjoy even to this day, 4 years later. And I honestly can't see myself doing anything different.
How long did it take for your arcade to get noticed and gain regular customers? Was it difficult to get to this point? Was it ever a struggle?
We were very fortunate right from the get-go. We had a great response on day one. We had gotten 200 people through the door. We were really worried about whether or not we were going to be able to cover rent and cover our bills and be able to pay ourselves and all the things that all businesses worry about. And we wound up finding from day one that there was going to be a good reception for us. We were very fortunate that in the first year we were already making money right out the get-go. We had a very good business model as far as running the free play style of arcades. We were very retro oriented, which meant that we could wind up picking a lot of our games up at a very affordable price, and things that weren't necessarily working properly when we picked them up, we felt confident that we would be able to get them up and running, which allowed us to buy broken machines and put in a little bit of labor and a little bit of work and get something that would be worth more at a lower dollar upfront cost, which helped us out greatly. So having, very low overhead and then having a great customer base was really good for us and allowed us to grow as fast as we did. For the first 2.5 years or so that we were in business, we did really, really well. We were able to continue to reinvest into the business, bring in over 100 games to be able to continue adding more value to what we had on the floor. And it wasn't until COVID hit that we really took a hit and saw a loss in what we were doing. The 2-month closures that were pushed forth by the state of Wisconsin during that initial push during COVID was very difficult for us. We still had bills to pay. We still had overhead that had to be covered. Luckily, we had put ourselves into a position where we had money set aside and saved for a rainy day, for buying new machines. And that allowed us to kind of tap into what we had to be able to stay afloat during a very difficult time. And then once we were able to reopen, it was still a very tough business environment during that upswing during COVID, where you could open your doors, but you were limited in capacity, people having to wear masks, and COVID in general was a very polarizing subject for people. We, regardless of what our stance was as far as masks and things like that, we were in a lose-lose situation. If we forced people to wear masks, we lost customers that refused to wear them. And if we acted in a way where we didn't ask people to wear masks, it could be perceived as being very irresponsible and would definitely detour the other side of the fence, the pro-mask wearers, from wanting to come into our place. So it was a very tough position to be in. Luckily, myself, my business owner Tim, and my wife Mara, we all kind of sat down and took a look at all the information. We all had very different viewpoints, and we tried to come up with the best mix of being able to provide our customers with a safe play environment, to meet the federal and state mandates, and to make people comfortable with coming in during a very difficult time for everybody in this society. And we've now been fortunate a year later where most of our business has recovered. We're starting to see profits again. We're starting to be able to purchase machines again, to be able to upgrade what we have on the floor and offer something different, change things up to kind of help to entice some of our regulars into coming back. And that's been the biggest challenge for us, was trying to negotiate our business through COVID. And I've said from day one that if we can make it through COVID, we can make it through pretty much anything. And we were able to, we got through it. And it was a very good business experience for us, because it really did help to stress the importance of putting money aside for a rainy day, planning for the unknown, and looking at what our business is going to look like over the next 5 to 7 years, and where do we want to go, and kind of give us clarity as to what the next step for the Garcade would be.
What feedback about the arcade have you received from the local community?
We are really fortunate. We've got a fantastic community out here in Menomonee Falls and the surrounding areas. We've been received very, very well. We work very hard to keep a clean arcade that is very well maintained, and our customers definitely appreciate that. And on the same token, they've shown their love and support. I mean, there's nothing better than showing up to work every single day and having not just one, not just two, but several customers come up to me, thank me for doing what I'm doing, thanking me for having a business like this, so that they can share the same experiences that they had growing up with their kids. Being able to lean on that nostalgia puts people in a great mindset when they walk in the door, and being able to give them something where they can look forward to it and families can spend time playing together, that's very important for us. So our customers are just phenomenal. We've got tons of regulars, people that come in, even multiple times in the same week to continue playing games and to be able to do different things with us. We're at a point where we're at almost 200 games on the floor, and so there's a lot here for people to be able to do, and it's very difficult for them to be able to take it all in one sitting, regardless of how long you're here. And so especially for the real hardcore gamers, the guys that love those retro styles of games, it's a great experience and something that they want to do more often than just that once in a while. And they're really the bread and butter of what we do on a daily basis. And then all of the additional walk-ins, the parents that want to have their kids' birthday parties here, that exposes another generation to something that was very, very cool and nostalgic for a lot of us older folks.
From a networking perspective, how have other arcade owners helped you out both personally and online?
Here in the Midwest, we're really fortunate to have as many arcade owners that know each other that do. When I first started out as trying to get into opening a commercial style arcade, I had the ability to lean on other arcade owners like Doc Mack, who owns Galloping Ghost Arcade, which is the largest arcade in the world at this point. I've had other owners like Scott Lambert of the Underground Retrocade, who kind of paved a path before me, and they were able to give me information that I wouldn't have been able to necessarily get even talking to other people in business, because what we do is so different and so niche that understanding the ins and outs and the problems that we were going to have and how to get around some of the various things, finding tech help, they were critical in us being able to open the arcade. Doc Mack and Scott Lambert both sat down with me, and they were very honest, very truthful, very forthcoming in telling me, you know, even going as far as opening their books to me and showing me what their costs were and how many customers they were bringing in. And having two different arcades of two various sizes, you know, Doc Mack being as large as he is, having almost 800 games on the floor at this point, and Scott Lambert being a little bit closer to where we're at, having about 150, 175 games on his floor, allowed us to kind of see what the differences were going to wind up being if we went too big or too small, or, you know, to help us kind of figure out what size of a place we were looking for, how comfortable they were in the places that they were in, and what we were going to wind up doing to add our own spin into it. And for us, you know, the Garcade has gone and opened their books and talked to other arcade owners since our opening and offered that same courtesy and continued to pay that forward, because without that kindness, we wouldn't have gotten into where we are today. And so we were very helpful with other arcades, even in the Midwest here. Nerd Haven Arcade in Madison, Wisconsin, Rocket Arcade in Michigan, Starcade in Minnesota, where we were talking to owners that were considering opening arcades and help to motivate them to go ahead and take that leap of faith. Allow them to feel more comfortable with making a business decision that, if went bad, could cost them thousands of dollars out of their own personal money. So we definitely have tried to engage and continue to engage them even after opening. We've got a great Facebook group where we can kind of all get together and talk about our business experiences, and to be able to lean on each other and what we're trying and what it's doing, and is it working for us? What kind of advertising are we doing? You know, is it time to raise rates so that everybody's kind of doing it around the same time? Are we doing anything different with how we're approaching our own business model? Because everybody does things just a little bit different and kind of puts their own spin onto it. And so, you know, having a really tight-knit community of business owners throughout the Midwest has been an amazing experience. And we're really fortunate to have such a great group of guys that have no problem leaning on each other and knowing that we're all going to be honest with each other about where we're at and what's going on, and not just trying to figure out how we're going to take our business and make our business profitable and one of the best sets out there, but to also help other arcades, which other businesses, you know, even if you're a city or two away, you look at them as competition, and we don't do that. It's really neat that all of the arcades that we have throughout the area here in Wisconsin and Illinois especially, the owners all know each other, the owners all talk, the owners share experiences, and there's very, very little cutthroat competition between us. And about the only time that cutthroat competition comes in is when we all want the same game.
What are your most played arcade cabinets and pinball machines? Why do you think they are the most played?
Here at the Garcade, we have a couple of games that we see people on nonstop. Of course, from an arcade standpoint, you're going to have the people that are going to gravitate towards the classics. And so games like Miss Pac-Man, Pac-Man, Galaga, Donkey Kong, we tend to have more than one version of that on the floor for people to be able to play, because we don't want people to have to wait in line behind other people to necessarily be able to get on to play that one game that they're just craving to play. From a pinball perspective, it's a little bit different. For the most part, the machines that get the most play in the pinball side of things wind up being whatever the latest and greatest winds up being. Whoever picks up a recently released machine. For us right now, that's Mandalorian, where it was just released a couple of days ago. Distributors just got it. And so for us, we're seeing that one machine getting non-stop play from open to close. And it's nice because that helps reinforce that we're making the right decisions as far as what kinds of games that we're bringing in. We've also brought in other games that get a lot of attention around here, like Cosmotrons, which is an indie classic that has done really, really well for us. We've done different competitive tournaments with that machine. We did our Cosmo Olympics a couple of years ago at the Midwest Gaming Classic, and it's a game that's been really well received, and part of that reason is because it's a 4-player game where all 4 players interact competitively with each other throughout the course of the entire gameplay. And so it's very quick hit games, it's quick boards, and people get to play and really have a lot of fun together, basically beating each other up, which is great. You also see the people that come in that want to play the 90s beat 'em ups like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, X-Men. Those tend to get a lot of gameplay. And then there's always the stuff that the little kids absolutely enjoy, which winds up being a lot of the shooting games and driving games, because they can't do that in real life. So you will always see a lot of the little kids around those areas having a really good time. And so it's nice. We have a little bit of everything for people of different levels of play, and it's great. Like we have a really good time with it.
What goals do you have for your arcade?
As far as goals for us, we strive to hit a couple of different goals on a regular basis. We want to keep a very clean arcade. We want to keep most of our games up and running at all times. We don't want people to come in and have the one game that they wanted to play be down. And so we work really hard to make sure that we have as many working games on the floor at all times as possible. From a larger goal, we are already kind of talking as to what Garcade version 2.0 is going to look like. And so we're starting to put plans into place to try and find a place that's even larger than what we're in now. Right now we've got about 7,200 square feet of arcade space. We would like to push that closer to 20 to 30,000 square feet. We would like to offer additional amenities, not just the arcade games and the pinball machines, but to be able to get more into some redemption style games, some things like skee ball and hoop it up basketball. We would like to be able to do an indoor mini golf course. We have all sorts of ideas, and so it's kind of nailing down what we want to do, how it's going to fit into the space that we find next. And so that's the biggest challenge that we're coming into right now, is trying to find the appropriate amount of space available for us, and to look at what it's going to cost for us to go through, get that space ready for ourselves and our clients, for us to open the arcade and offer additional amenities, to offer more of a family entertainment center style of arcade for people so that we have more and more to be able to hit on a larger and larger customer base.
I do know that in, I believe it was the early 2000s, Fun World had closed. In Brookfield, right there in Blue Mound. And you were just talking about all the things that you wanted to add, and that place actually had all those.
It had a lot of pieces of that.
Yeah. You went there. Do you know?
I had been there a couple of times. I don't know if you know this. Dan Lewson was one of the managers there for a while, so he's got a lot of nostalgia for it. It's a really cool building. It's definitely older and would need a little bit of work. But there are reasons as to why we're not looking at that space. We would love to, but I believe the price point's just not going to be in the right spot for us.
Pretty expensive by what I hear, so.
Yeah, there's
the tax.
There's additional reasoning behind that. There was, at one point, Menards had put in an offer to them as a secondary build location in case their first build location was denied by the city. And because they needed X amount of space and there was very, very limited amounts available, they put in a very exorbitant offer. And once they put that offer in, Fun World was like, sweet, we're selling, we're out, we're done. And as it wound up turning out, their original site was approved, they rescinded their offer, and from that point moving forward, the current owners of that facility are under the expectation that that's how much they should wind up getting for it. And so it basically overinflated for no good reason. And so, and we would like to own a building versus lease.
Right.
So we've talked about looking for raw land, putting up a steel building, looking for malls that have been defunct and that we want to buy and purchase and renovate. So there's different possibilities for us, but in all honesty, as nice as Fun World was, because it was a great place, I'm not thrilled with the location.
Yeah, I mean, where it's at, tucked back a little bit, you gotta go out down a road and then hit it, and then it's like a lot of times.
And it's behind other stuff, which doesn't help.
An ice rink that's right there.
Right.
And it's just like, you miss it. You
right.
Really miss it. And I remember when I first started going there, I missed it a couple times and I actually had to go around and go, oh, there it is.
Right.
So, yeah.
So that makes it a little difficult. And then, in all honesty, we love Menomonee Falls. Like, it is fantastic here. We get that real small town feel, but we're a suburb of Milwaukee, so we still get to draw off of the 750,000 people in Milwaukee to kind of help supplement our clientele base. We've talked about opening another location in another city around the state, and we have one or two possibilities, but for the most part, Milwaukee is the only place that has enough people, we feel, to continue to support us as the next iteration of what we would like to do.
What's your favorite game here to play, and how often do you get a chance to play it?
Oh man, I'm gonna need a minute on that one. Because that's a trick question. It really is.
Sure, you have a pinball, you have an arcade, you have a cabinet.
In all honesty, I think, what's my favorite game here? As far as pinball is concerned, for me, it tends to wind up being whatever the latest and greatest is. From an arcade standpoint, it winds up being whatever's new, whatever we just brought in, because it's something different. But usually when people ask me that question, I look at it as a trick question, because in all honesty, my favorite game to play is Arcade Technician. So I took my hobby, the thing that I like to do in my spare time, working on games, fixing games, and I turned it into a job. And so for me, being able to do my hobby all day, every day, work on machines, play with pinball machines, open things up, figure out how they work, get them working better, That's what I have fun doing. My business partner, Tim, he's got his favorites. He definitely has 3 or 4 games on the floor that have to stay, have to be close to the register, just so that he can continue to play them. But for me, like I said, my favorite game is Arcade Technician.
That was a good one. That was, you thought about that. I like that.
I've been asked that before. It's so funny because like I get asked that by customers, and it's like, what's my favorite game? Well, I can give you a laundry list of games,
right,
because they're all different in different ways, and I can value those differences, especially like the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pinball. It has all of these different modes that you can go into and access right out of the gate before the game even starts. And so it adds a wide variety of gameplay where it's not just, here's your game, this is the path, go ahead. I have a very short attention span, and so for me to sit and get good at a game, playing it over and over and over again, playing the same boards over and over and over again, I'm good for about 10 minutes. After that, I'm like, I'm good, I'm done. And so for me, you know, I need things to be different. I need things to be challenging on a daily basis, and that's why. Like, I would rather fix stuff.
Right. You like to work with your hands, and you like.
I do. I missed it.
Problems.
When I worked in IT, I missed working with my hands, being able to fabricate and manufacture from scratch, and so I get to do that here, and so I get to kind of fulfill some of those personal needs that I have to really find job enjoyment.
What makes your arcade stand out from others that makes it awesome?
I think for us, a lot of it comes down to the ambiance here. It's the little touches that really set us apart from everybody else. It's the decor, it's the lighting, it's how clean it is, it's how wide open our rows are. A lot of arcades, they try to pack as many games in as they can, and for us, we felt it was very important to have some place that was accessible by everybody. We wanted to have rows that would be wide enough where you could play games on both sides, and our rule of thumb was to be able to get a wheelchair through the center without disrupting people playing games. So making a place that is accessible to even people with disabilities was very important for us. We looked for a location that didn't have stairs, that had accessible bathrooms, that would be one single level. There wouldn't be any other inclines or anything for it to make it more challenging for anybody that, you know, does have some sort of challenge in their life. And we found after opening that that was one of the best decisions we ever made. We have several customers, regulars, that come in that are either on the autism spectrum, that have other disabilities like Down syndrome, that are in wheelchairs, and they love coming here because our place is accessible to them. They can go in and feel like they're one of everybody else. There's nothing holding them back from being able to come out and enjoy themselves. So between the ambiance and the cleanliness and the game selection, you can find games at any arcade. That's what it is. It's an arcade. But having one that's accessible to everybody, that allows families to come together and play together regardless of ability, that's one thing that we felt was very, very important and really has made this job even more rewarding.
If someone wants to open their own arcade, what's the #1 suggestion you have for them?
If somebody wanted to open their own arcade, the first thing that I would tell them to do is go out, talk to other arcade owners, and find out what their experiences are. Really see if that's something that you want to do. This job is not for everybody. It is a lot of customer service. It is a lot of cleaning. It is a lot of work that you wouldn't necessarily expect to come into owning a business, and that can be said for any business. If you own a landscape company, the first thing you think of is, I'm going to be out mowing lawns, and I'm going to be, weeding gardens and things like that. The parts of the business that you don't understand is, I am going to have to fix trucks and fix snow equipment at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's snowing outside and nobody's open and there are no hardware stores. How do I continue running my business? And it's the same thing here. There are going to be days when you are going to have to do the horrible things like unclogging toilets or changing light bulbs or vacuuming floors, wiping down machines. There's a lot of thankless work that goes into it, and understanding that there's going to be that balance between the thankless work and the work that you want to do, like working on machines, fixing things, working on projects. That balance is what makes it worthwhile, and then the customers and their response is really what takes it over the top. Seeing customers walk into my business on a daily basis and their kids walk in and their jaws hit the floor, their mouths are agape. Parents look down our rows and they start pointing out games that they remember growing up, and that look of astonishment. Every time I see that, it reaffirms that I am doing the right thing with my life, and I have found something to do that is going to be rewarding, that's going to be financially stable. That is critical. And so understanding that there's going to be that life balance between the really horrible stuff and the really, really good stuff, that's one thing that you need to understand. But doing it is so rewarding. It is so much fun. I get to take a break and play test games to make sure that they're working right. That's what we call it. Quality assurance. It's great. You get to go and have fun while you're at work. There's seldom a time when our employees are walking around without a smile on their face, because this is a really fun, joyous place to work. Seeing everybody of various ages, even once in a while you get that 75-year-old guy that remembers playing the electromechanical pinball machines when he was younger, and then seeing one of them on our floor and being able to relive that experience. It's fantastic. That is what we live for, is to, have people that find that little bit of inner joy just taking 5 minutes out of their day to play something they remember at a really fun time in their life is fantastic. We absolutely love it. So, talk to other business owners, find out what it takes. We opened our business, I believe we had like $40,000 in the bank. We all took out very small loans against 401ks and things like that to be able to make this investment. And those are the types of sacrifices that need to happen regardless of what kind of business that you're going to open. And walking into it with the attitude that I'm going to do this regardless of what anybody else thinks. I am going to make this work. I am going to put the work in, and not putting that on anybody else helps to ensure that you've got the right mindset to keep going even when the times are tough, when the games aren't working, when somebody's complaining that their favorite game is broken. Those can be real downer times, and the other times that you're doing things help to offset that easily. So, I tell business owners all the time that want to open arcades, do it. Absolutely do it. That, you can make a living doing it. You can find a lot of enjoyment, and you can really have something great in your area.
Okay, and just one little thing, and it's a promo. You can say it any way you want to the camera. Support your local arcade.
Support your local arcades, guys. This is what we need to do. We need to make sure that we are out on a regular basis, showing our support by going out, visiting these arcades, spending just a little bit of your money and a little bit of your time having a great time playing classic games and showing these people that what they're doing really matters.
All right. And that's a wrap for interviewing Gar Nelson of the Garcade.
Oh, wait, am I? Oh, sure. I hit the record button.
And there you go. That's the interview that I had with Gar Nelson of the Garcade. As you can see, it was a very informative and entertaining interview with Gar. He was very, very gracious with having me come in and film, as you could see at the beginning of the video, and be able to go around the arcade and film people playing. That was very, very nice of him, and I greatly, greatly appreciate all of his help and assistance. And he is a great part of the Midwest Gaming Classic Convention. Every year I look forward to speaking with him and playing some of his pinball and arcade games. He is definitely an asset to the show. And that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and game on.